Hello and welcome to Unmasking the Tactics of Cybercriminals Targeting Your Organization from Critical Insight. There are a few things we'd like you to know. Livestorm begins all of our webinars with your sound on mute. If you can't hear us, click on the screen to turn on the sound. Your microphone will remain muted, but please use the chat to talk to us. If the alerts are too much, you can mute them by clicking on the bell on the right. And you will automatically get a recording, but if you'd like the presentation slides, please email me, Virginia Case at vcase@criticalinsight.com.
Yeah, I want to talk quickly about why you're here and why you should listen to us and why we have good information to share. We are a full-service cybersecurity provider, everything prepared, detect, and respond. So making sure your IR plans are in place, you have tabletops, you've got your audits prep ready. We've got our managed detection and response services help you detect when things are happening and rapidly respond to those. And certainly a full response capability. Our IR team and virtual CISOs can help you through the worst of times. So back to you, Virginia.
Thank you, Fred. And let's do some introductions here. Fred Langston is the co-founder and chief product officer for Critical Insight, a pioneer in InfoSec with over 2 decades of experience. Fred was an author of the HIPAA Security Rule. With over 24 years of professional information security experience working for thousands of clients, he has created effective risk management strategies, enterprise security, and data protection programs. He's an in-demand subject matter expert and has been quoted by several of the nation's most trusted editorial news outlets. Also joining me on the left-hand side, we have Brad Swanson, who is the Deputy CISO and Principal Consultant of Critical Insight, where he provides virtual CISO and cybersecurity services to clients across various industries. With expertise in network security, compliance, and IT management, he helps organizations achieve their security and compliance goals. Certified as a CISSP and holding multiple certifications, he is well-versed in delivering robust security solutions. He also leads security awareness training and conducts an audit gap analysis for key regulations, bringing over 3 decades of hands-on experience to his role. And last but not least, we have Mike Hamilton, who is the co-founder and CISO of Critical Insight. He is the former CISO for the City of Seattle and former vice chair of the DHS Government Council, frequently quoted in major media like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Magazine. Mike is an in-demand speaker and educator, leading our free monthly security awareness trainings. Mike also leads the nonprofit Pisces, which provides no-cost cyber monitoring for small local governments and uses collected data to train the next generation of cyber analysts at 20-plus U.S. colleges and universities. And without further ado, let's kick things off. Mike?
Okay, so first let me say we got to shorten those bios. Wow. Hi, everybody. Before we get going here, I do want to talk about who we're trying to reach with these messages, because really the focus of this webinar is to talk about the tactics that are being used routinely and some of the things that you can do that would allow you to prioritize resources. Now, if you're Lockheed, you're on the wrong webinar. But if you are local government, rural healthcare at all, small business, right? SMBs, this is for you. So you can't spend big, we know, on security. So if there's a few things that you can do that move the needle a lot, that's what we're here to talk about. Before we get going as well, I want to make sure everybody's grounded in the real outcomes we're trying to avoid. Cyber isn't it, okay? Unauthorized disclosure of protected records costs about $200 a record to clean up. Figure out what your liability is, right? That's how to do that math. Theft through business email compromise, extortion, ransomware, denial of service, records theft, and holding those in abeyance. Being that third party that jumps off and attacks others, you don't want to be that. And you don't want to be disrupted just for the sake of disruption. So there's 5 business outcomes that we're trying to avoid here. So let's just stay grounded in that, because sadly, we have the worst secret handshake language in the world. Okay, so I want to talk about credential abuse, because this is kind of the top of the food chain. There are various estimates that say 90% of initial access is through some kind of credential abuse. So when we say credentials, we're meaning passwords and what you use to authenticate to systems and networks. So here's a few techniques. Number 1, password guessing. I know of a public sector jurisdiction recently that was hit because they had a VPN. They had not enabled multi-factor authentication on it yet. And one of their users had a password of summer 2024 bang. And if you don't know this, there are kits out there that do password guessing, and they have lists of typically used passwords. There are a top 100 that really a lot of people use. So if your password is password, or it's summer 2024 exclamation point $, something like that, they know this, right? You can't use credentials like that. So guessing is too easy. Stuffing. Credential stuffing is when you have a list of passwords, and maybe these are passwords that are just in one of these kits because they're commonly used passwords, or maybe they're from a password dump. So for example, Yahoo, when they were going through an acquisition, lost 1 billion passwords, which did not help their valuation at the time. And those passwords are out there. You've seen that there were 2.9 billion records disclosed, many of which had passwords associated with them. So they can get these lists and they can go through these and they can try these. And if you have shared a password between different services and one of those services has a disclosure of that information, they're going to find that password in there and they're going to try it elsewhere in your Amazon account, PayPal, Bank of America, etc. So sharing passwords, a very bad practice, leads to initial access for bad guys, right? And the initial access eventually turns out to be records disclosure, theft, extortion, disruption, being used as a third party. Don't want that. There's also cracking. So you see there's a cracking kit there on the side. There's lots of these. What was the first one, you guys? Was John the Ripper? Was that the first cracker?
It's still a gold standard. John is still absolutely a gold standard for password cracking.
So cracking passwords, if we can get a hold of your encrypted passwords, right? Steal a password file and it's got encrypted passwords in it, go to work on that and might get a hit. And then there's info stealers. So info stealers, if you run over one of these and you have an unpatched browser, hello Chrome, it will pull all of the stored credentials out of your browser. So if you're using your browser to store, that's a pretty bad practice because these things are out there and they're specifically designed to pull all the stuff out of your browser so that they can go reuse that elsewhere. So here are a few techniques, and I'll point out this one in particular, credential stuffing. And the big thing about credential stuffing is there's really no one behind a keyboard trying to do this. There are bots out there that coordinate thousands of compromised computers all over the world and put them to work guessing passwords, reusing passwords, using a database of passwords. You know, this is pretty prolific.
Hey, Mike, going back to what you had on the last slide, one of the things that I think we all struggle with is all of these passwords being just a huge burden on our memories, a lot of these tools, we don't know which ones we can trust. So can you talk a little bit about the dangers of repeat password usage? Because I feel like that lends itself to this conversation as well.
Yeah, well, that's, the sharing of passwords is a particularly bad habit. And when we get to, here's some recommendations to avoid, this kind of attack being successful. We can talk about password vaults and prohibiting the use of browsers for storing passwords. But if you're sharing passwords, you're just making it too easy. You are making it too easy. And a lot of people do this. It's human nature, right? There are these cognitive biases that we have that lend themselves to thinking, oh, this will be okay. My password is complex enough. And that may be true. But if they find it in one place and you're using it somewhere else, they're going to get you.
And Fred, we were talking about passwords the other day too.
Yeah, I was, what I'm kind of struck by, a lot of people don't realize you don't really need to have high-powered cracking software. Everybody's talking about, hey, quantum breaking of passwords, that era is upon us, right? We just last week, National Institute of Standards and Technology put out a quantum forward encryption standard. So these are supposedly resistant to quantum encryption breaking. But what does this mean? It means all those password hashes that have been stolen over the years, some of them too long to crack. If we get to the point where we have quantum computers that can easily crack them, they're going to go backwards. And they're going to crack all those really hard, really long passwords. And if those have been stolen, those are now all of a sudden going to become useful. So strong passwords, stolen, uncrackable, Well, not in a year or two. So keep that in mind. That will change. The other part is if you have anything under like a 10 character password, they have what they call rainbow tables. In other words, they have pre-computed every potential combination of 10 character passwords in existence and created tables of those hashes. So you can go, and usually if you do this online, you're going to go to a site in Russia and they're going to get your IP address and try to use it against you. So be careful. But you can go and look up any password and find out what the hash is, and then go search for the hash, and you can reverse it and say, well, then clearly this is the password. So it's not just high-powered cracking. Most passwords can actually be trivially cracked within a short period of time.
And Fred, what's a hash?
Hash is the cryptographic function, one-way cryptographic function that basically is how you take your password and scramble it in a manner that it cannot be unscrambled, right? So once it's scrambled, it's virtually impossible to unscramble. So what we know when we look at the scrambled passwords that Microsoft keeps in your computer, we can compare that hash, that weird big long string of cryptographic values, and say if it's identical and we know what that hash comes from, because that particular mathematical function always will return that same hash for a particular password, then we can look backwards and say, well, then clearly this is the password.
Oh, thanks.
And it's not even the bar to entry to cracking passwords is getting lower every day. It used to be that 8 characters was the gold standard for a password. It had to be at least 8 characters, and a mix of uppercase, lowercase numbers, symbols. You can now build a cracking rig. It's basically a computer with 8 video cards, and they're NVIDIA like 3000 series video cards, so they're affordable now. 8 of those will crack an 8-digit password, no matter the complexity of it. If it's 8 characters, it'll crack any password within 4 hours, and that's within the realm of consumer-grade hardware without even having to look at quantum computing. So it's progressing pretty quick.
Okay, I'm gonna double down on this bot thing here. So, credential stuffing, there isn't a person behind a keyboard, and here's the proof. So this is me. This is me looking up recent activity on my Authenticator app. Note the timestamps: 256, 256, 256, 256, 257. Note the sources: Kuwait, Russia, India, China. Okay. This is all happening by orchestrating these probably compromised computers all over the world, and they're all doing this password guessing against me. Now, this never would have worked because we use multi-factor authentication pervasively, and we use an access policy that would not let me log in from outside the United States. So conditional access is a very good way to ameliorate this kind of attack, but you should know this is going on. And if you're monitoring your VPN, your remote access system, you will see this stuff going on because it is probably 30% of internet traffic. Isn't bots, didn't they just say it was 30% of internet traffic? It's crazy. Okay, so that's just like the low end, right? Guessing, cracking, stuffing. A lot of people have implemented multi-factor authentication, and that is also defeatable. There's a number of ways that this is done. One is called MFA fatigue. And what that is, if you have a password and you're getting challenged for the second factor, just keep doing it over and over and over. And the person on the other end with the phone and the Authenticator app, they'll go, something's going wrong. I just got to make this stop. That's it. They're in. That's MFA fatigue. And if you've ever experienced a whole bunch of challenges coming over your phone or over your authentication token for that second factor, you're under attack. That's what that is. Do not approve. SIM swapping. SIM swapping is, so if I can call your telecom provider and I have enough information to impersonate you, and I say, hey, I was taking pictures of Mount Rainier from the ferry, and Orca jumped up and ate my phone. So this is my new phone, and could you assign my old phone number to this phone? And if I am successful doing that, I'm holding your phone. And I can do something like go to your Gmail account and say, forgot password. And it'll say, okay, what's the code that just came on your phone? I'm in. So If your phone stops functioning and you don't know why, absolutely call your telecom provider and ask the following question. Have any changes been made to my account recently? And if they say yes, terminate everything. Social engineering, we can talk you into accepting a multi-factor authentication challenge, and we'll come back to this. Brad's going to talk about this, and he has a lot of experience with this. But then there's one that's been popping up, and we have seen this very close up. So let me explain this. This is called session stripping. So when you are interacting with Microsoft and you're on your computer and you're all authenticated and all that, you have a session token, which tells Microsoft, this is a session, this person has authenticated, this traffic can come and go. User gets a piece of email and it's got a link to Microsoft. So for example, it'll say 99% of your mailbox usage, you've reached your limit. Here's our dashboard. You can check this out for yourself. And it's a link to Microsoft. However, that link is actually activating a script, and that script proxies your connection to Microsoft. And so you hand off to that script, and the actor in the middle, the adversary in the middle, strips that session token, presents it to Microsoft. Microsoft says, hey, great session you got there. But I've never seen this device before, so here's your challenge for the second factor. Route it back to the user who thinks they are authenticating to Microsoft because it's a Microsoft asset they're trying to get to, says, okay, bad guy, adversary, presents that to Microsoft, and you have just given up the farm. That took 15 seconds. And we have seen this up close and personal. This is a fire we put out in 5 minutes, but hey, this thing really happens quickly. And so what's the take-home message here? If you get, a lot of people are experienced enough to know, hey, this is a phishing message I just got. I wonder what the site looks like that they set up to try and fool me, the fake SharePoint site or the fake DocuSign site. I'm just going to check it out. That's how you could end up getting this session stripped, and you will give away Teams, SharePoint, Office 365, and any single sign-on applications you have, for example, HR, right? You don't want to do that. That's session stripping. Yeah, we'll come back. Brad will do a better job of explaining how to just talk somebody through this and get it that way, because that's a pretty good attack. Okay, so the take-home messages here. It's a really good idea to be monitoring, especially your remote access systems. People are guessing passwords. Bots are guessing passwords. And if you see a big uptick in this, you may have been targeted. So it's really good to monitor these things going on and get a report every day. Here's how many login failures we got. Use a password vault. Keeper, LastPass, OnePass, Dashlane. There's a lot of them. One of those is much better to use than your browser for the storage of credentials. And there are ways through group policy objects to prohibit the storage of credentials in browsers. Use multi-factor authentication everywhere. Teach your users about these techniques. What do you do if you get a whole bunch of challenges here? Well, you need to report it, number one, and ignore it. Use conditional access policies. We don't want anybody to be logging in from, Russia. That's pretty straightforward. That's easy to block. Now, importantly, what Fred and Brad were talking about, the ease of cracking short passwords, start using passphrases. Okay. And, this whole, we change this every 90 days or whatever, throw that out the window. If you're using multi-factor authentication everywhere and you have a policy of use a passphrase, okay, the 4 words separated by spaces, the first line of a book, something that is a sentence that's got a whole bunch of characters in it and makes that would take too long to crack for somebody to waste their time with. So, there's a famous XKCD cartoon about this. Correct horse battery staple, right, is the example they give in this cartoon to teach everybody this is a much better thing, would take a lot longer to crack this. Don't use correct horse battery staple. You might want to use person, man, woman, camera, TV, but that one's pretty easy to guess too at this point. And then consider zero trust, right? Zero trust is a method of authenticating you once and then authorizing you to every asset inside of a network, every resource inside of a network. And it has to do with whether or not you have an active session, whether or not your device has been seen, whether or not your location on Earth has changed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot that goes to it, but that's a good initiative to be involved in. It is a heavy lift, but eventually let's all get there. Okay, so with that, I am going to turn this over to Fred, who is going to talk about vulnerability exploit.
Yeah, so I want to start off by saying it was hard to pick this as a topic. Why was it hard to pick this as a topic? Well, I think if I go back 30 years ago to my very first times doing information security webinars, this was a topic. And frankly, everything I'm going to talk about here has not changed in 30 years yet. Last year in 2023, 30% of the major breaches were due to unpatched vulnerabilities on internet exposed systems. Why is this? Why is this the most well-known thing in all of security, yet it is still the number one way technologically for a bad guy to get in? Well, because it's hard to do, because people don't have the right policies, the right prioritization. So we're going to go over this stuff again to make sure everybody understands what it means to have a vulnerability, how to manage those, mitigate them, and make sure that you're not going to get popped because you're leaving one of these exposed. So what is a vulnerability? Again, so it's anything that can be exploited by a threat actor, a threat, to gain unauthorized access. And unauthorized access in quotes can be, I have access to compute power, I have access to data, I have access to the system, I have access to the functions on the system. It can be any of those types of things. But where do these things occur? Well, it could be the design. We've designed this particular architecture to where it has weaknesses. An internet user can bang on an internal server because we have a rule that is incorrect on our firewall. Our design is incorrect in how we've done it. We've implemented things incorrectly. We haven't turned on the correct SSL or turned off the correct SSL ciphers in favor of TLS 1.3, for example. That would be an implementation mistake, right? Where you've enabled insecure ciphers for your handshake, right? Your cryptographic handshake. How you're operating the system, okay? Operating the system where somebody can call in and get a hey, I need a password change to this account, and I'm a domain administrator account that somebody's calling in. Well, you're not operating in a secure manner when you're operating these systems, and you're not managing it. Are you managing it? Are you patching it? Are you keeping it up to date? Are you making sure that any published vulnerabilities have some mitigating measure in place to protect that system, right? So vulnerabilities pop up all throughout this. It's not just, hey, Nessus hit this particular vulnerability and I have a CVE that has a 9 severity score, right? It's, hey, we're doing things in a way that's insecure, right? So you can't scan for every vulnerability. You need to assess your systems and where you're at. So we have, where do these things crop up? Well, insecure products, we know, right? Every vendor will have vulnerabilities in product releases. It's how fast they respond to those, how quickly they identify them, and how quickly they provide a patch to prevent that vulnerability. But every vendor in your environment, you need to be monitoring what that vendor is publishing about the security and the patches around that system. So there's insecure configurations, default passwords, such a classic one. Weak initial security. Like when you roll things out of the box, a Windows system out of the box, it's not secure by default. I mean, not in the way that we would consider. The logging certainly is not turned up to a level where you're going to be able to do a valid forensic investigation on an out-of-the-box Windows configuration. You need to apply probably some hardening scripts and a bunch of things. So if you're rolling out, your Windows laptops and throwing them out there with no effort around securing them, you're probably putting systems out there on the internet. If it's laptops that are moving around from home to coffee houses to airports, you're probably putting vulnerabilities that are literally moving around the world in real time. Another place, the place people commonly think about this are things like web apps. You've got a vulnerable web app. That's because it has been coded or designed improperly. And there are ways, of course, to go in and figure out what web apps have problems. what mobile apps that maybe connect to APIs, right? In the modern world, web apps are not just I go on the to a URL. It's my mobile app that's connecting to a web app API and all that ecosystem and how that works, right? So we need to understand not just the web app, but maybe we have mobile apps that are connecting to that web app. And now our phone is in scope, right? All of a sudden for being an area where vulnerabilities can be taken advantage of. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about buffer overflows and what happens when you have an insecurely coded application?
Okay. So the best analogy or the best example of this, I guess, is one that's pretty old. And I use this when we do security awareness training. A long time ago, a program called SendMail, the original mail transport agent. Okay. It's not what you type mail into. It's when you say send, it's your server that takes it from you and then goes and finds the recipient server and hands it off. Okay. Mail transfer, MTA. And so Eric Ullman was the author of SendMail. He's coding this up and he says, well, I need a variable for sender address. Okay. Sender address is never going to be more than 255 characters. So I'm going to give it a 255 byte buffer. He did not bound the buffer and make it impossible for more characters than that to be coming in as a sender address and not truncated. So at character 256, 712, 1471, and on, you overflow the buffer. So the space that's been set aside for a variable, if it's not correctly bounded, you can shove something in there that's bigger than that, push into the running stack of the machine, and throw your choice of executable code in there, and you own that machine. This is usually when a patch comes out, this is usually what it's addressing. As Fred said, there's a lot of different vulnerabilities. The water utilities that were hit recently, it was because they bought these programmable logic controllers and never changed the passwords on them. Okay. They just made it too easy. All I had to do was look up the default on the internet and walk in. All right. Well, that is a vulnerability, but this buffer overflow vulnerability is generally the one that a patch is addressing.
Yep. And then, of course, you got poor policy, right? As we've been alluding to, weak passwords, shared passwords, reuse passwords, right? As Virginia was mentioning, reusing them means I'm using this on every software as a service app that I'm allowed to connect to. I'm using the same password at all of them. Bad idea, folks, right? One of them gets popped, one of them gets cracked. Now I have every single software as a service app you have. So you need to have these user policies, but there's also internal policies, right? We don't let systems go out with under TLS 1.3 encryption configured. We do not allow anyone to connect to a VPN without multi-factor authentication, or maybe ubiquitously, everything except for a local login maybe requires multi-factor authentication. So you manage vulnerabilities not just by running scans or looking at secure configurations, but making sure that you've got good coding practices for your team, that when you're buying products, you're making sure that you're buying them from companies that have good records for announcing when they have vulnerabilities and providing patches, and that you've got a way to understand your soft vulnerabilities, your process vulnerabilities, your policy vulnerabilities. Every one of these singularly can be turned into a working exploit. Well, the place that most people, when we think about, let's focus in on what we tend to think of classically, and that is software. All software has vulnerabilities. Avanti, we know huge damage done by the Avanti security flaws. Sonic walls have been routinely attacked and taken over. If you haven't had your data exposed by somebody in the MoveIt vulnerability, I know I've had 3 have come in this year from my data being stolen from somebody that had the MoveIt vulnerability. Both, matter of fact, my Social Security twice from my mortgage provider that all apparently use MoveIt to move your Social Security numbers around. We know Exchange servers, of course, were hugely exploited over the last couple of years. Wi-Fi. So there's this continuous drumbeat of vulnerabilities. And this is a challenge, right? It means I got to know about them. I got to know I have them. I got to know what to do. Can I patch it? Is there a mitigating measure? Is there a published workaround? Here's what I do while I'm waiting for a patch to be deployed, right? All these things need to be tested, right? I can't just go out and throw a patch out there and say, well, we're going to roll out patches to everybody here because tonight, Microsoft says we've got a critical vulnerability out there. Well, we usually need to do some testing beforehand to make sure we're not doing what CrowdStrike did, right? CrowdStrike did an update, brought down the internet, folks, right? Biggest security provider in the world, biggest outage IT of the world as a result of that particular event. So you need to test these things, right? And then you need to roll them out in a prioritized fashion. You need to make sure they get on the systems they matter the most early, and then as you work through your technology stack, you start handling systems that have less risk associated with them. And it's a race, okay? What we want to really help you understand here, all of this is a gigantic race. We're now in a huge effort here where the bad guys learn about something, right? Or they, even worse, have detected something that we don't know about called a zero-day vulnerabilities. The bad guys figured it out before the good guys, the rest of us. And they're now using it or selling it, and we have large-scale attacks being launched. So there's this race on when they know about a vulnerability, when we know, and when a patch is available. And to make it even worse, the entire world of this sort of hacking is automated. There's no bad guy in a hoodie really sitting back there making any of this happen. These are big programs that run usually using the bots. Remember, Mike talked about botnets here, the great place to launch these. And it goes out and it scans the world. The second we know that a particular high risk, high severity, critical severity vulnerability is out there, the bad guys will instantaneously begin scanning the entire, all IP, v4 and v6 IP space will be scanned, looking for these vulnerabilities. The second a system, again, there's not a person there that sees this, it says, I see this. And now, you know what, I'm going to start attacking that particular vulnerability in a fully automated fashion. So it doesn't matter if you are a two-person mom and pop grocery store, or if you are, as Mike says, Lockheed, you look identical to the bad guy. The bad guy's a machine that doesn't care who you are. They just want your money, your resources, your records, or to use you against somebody else. So Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to double down on that. It was reported when there was the big on-premise exchange vulnerability. Yes, it's not just criminals that go to work reverse engineering the patch to figure out what it fixes so they can design the exploit to break that thing. It's also countries. And so it was reported that after Microsoft announced the vulnerability in on-premise exchange and sent out the patch, scanning started by China in 5 minutes. 5 minutes after that announcement. And like Fred says, a lot of people say, we're too small. Why would they come after us? The scanner does not care how big you are. They don't care who you are or whether you have something of value or not. The scanner is going to find you. And now the automation is not just detecting that you are vulnerable, but applying the exploit. All this stuff is automated.
Yep, exactly. So it's just a matter of finding you. If you have it, they're going to try to take advantage of you. Full stop. It's just the way the world works now. So how do you get ahead of this stuff? Well, certainly there's scanning for vulnerabilities. We're going to talk about that. But one of the things to really lean into is what they call the KEV. It's the currently exploited vulnerabilities list that the U.S. government, CISA, puts out. And what it is, it says, here's what we see from our intelligence. So we know that this vulnerability, because there's at any one time, there's, I think, like a couple 100,000 catalog vulnerabilities, right? Various severities. But the ones they care about are the ones that are being actively exploited by the bad guys, successfully exploited by the bad guys, and high volume of attacks. So if our government sees that a bad guy or the bad guys, bad people, are out there exploiting a particular vulnerability that has high severity and are being successful, they're going to add it to this list called the KEV. Going in and understanding if you have a vulnerability on the internet and exposed on a system that is on the KEV, the fuse is lit for you to get hacked. Literally, I mean, it could be the next minute, could be the next hour, could be the next day. And if you're lucky, it'll be the next week. But you will be caught and you will be compromised if you have a vulnerability on this list. So what do we do? How do we go about this? And again, this is the same thing I put on here for the last 30 years, right? This hasn't changed, right? But this is hard, right? Monitor vendors, get on their list. Everybody's got a published list. You join Microsoft, there's a mailing list you join that'll let you know we've got patches that we've just released that have security implications for these particular things. We have vulnerabilities we've identified that are this kind of severity. Maybe it has a published workaround. You need to monitor this entire ecosystem of information to know what is going on. You got to run vulnerability scans, folks. That's table stakes, right? If you're not looking for the vulnerabilities, you're basically driving down the freeway with a blindfold on at 60 miles an hour, right? You don't know what's coming. You can't possibly know what's around you. Make sure that you're prioritizing these. The best place to start is the KEV catalog to know, holy cow, this particular thing that we have is actively being exploited by bad guys. Fuse is lit. We got to do something. Using auto update, this is kind of a balance thing, right? You can use it some places. You certainly don't want to be using auto update on a domain controller, right? You need to test it. You need to make sure it's not going to break the domain controller. But on all your endpoints, you should probably use a Microsoft auto update, right? If we can move away from, let's put out a big patch push and go, so we lose a couple endpoints, right? Okay, so we have to rebuild a couple systems. It's a lot better than we lost everything. We lost our data and we're going to pay a $5 million ransom, right? Not hard to do that calculus. Ensure that systems that need a restart or an accompanying register change to activate the patches, make sure these things happen. Most people don't know and don't read Microsoft's Tuesday bulletins, because if you read them at least once a year, there will be something in there that says this patch doesn't take until you've made this registry change. And we find this all the time in vulnerability assessments that, well, they say, well, we patched that and we rebooted it. He said, yeah, but you didn't read the bulletin that said you needed to make a registry change for this to take effect. So don't just think that magically this stuff is going to happen if you don't read the bulletin. You need to read it, okay? And this is something that I am a huge evangelist. As a matter of fact, we have a link here. Virginia will place that into the chat. It's on this presentation from an article that I had in dark reading that states, whenever you have a higher critical security vulnerability for a technology product that's exposed to the internet, and we know that it's announced that this vulnerability exists, if mitigating measures are available or a patch is available, treat it like a security incident with all the emergency prioritization, the people pulling away from other things they're doing, because that fuse is lit. It's a matter of time before the bad guys are going to be taking advantage of that. It's a race.
It's a race.
When that's the green flag dropping. And if you're not crossing the finish line first, you're going to be paying millions of dollars, might be losing your job, your company may go out of business. So this is pretty basic table stakes, hard to pull off, and it gets worse. And I'm going to hand it to Brad to tell you how it gets even worse here.
Awesome. Thanks, Fred. And thanks, everybody, for attending today. It's great to see a bunch of familiar faces here. We're going to talk a little bit about social engineering. Now, we all socially engineer, whether it's getting an upgraded airline seat or a better hotel room by smiling and being friendly. We're going to be focusing today, though, on malicious social engineering and what the bad actors are doing. I'm old. I'm trying to change my language to be more inclusive. If I say bad guys, please forgive me. I mean bad actors. Male, female, non-binary, it doesn't matter. Anybody can be a malicious actor. So some of the things that they're using against us is the way that we think, the way that we process information internally, and they're going to leverage that. We have certain biases that we have. Some are conscious biases, some are unconscious biases. They're going to leverage those against us. Things like the halo effect. If I get a phishing email from Ferrari, hey, I like Ferrari, that's a good company. That's the halo effect. You have a positive view of that company that they're impersonating. You have hyperbolic discounting. This could be you're going to get something right now that's really worth a lot. never mind what you would get in the future. You want to act right now. Maybe it's a free trial, or you can get $4 million from this Nigerian prince that you're like a long lost relative of their legal person, but you have to act today. Don't wait and think about it, because it won't be available later. The curiosity effect, news headlines, especially in an election year, there is so much disinformation on both sides that we really need to watch that curiosity effect with news and things. Virginia, do you have anything that you'd like to put in?
Well, I know we had chatted earlier about the Nigerian money scams, but I would love to know, like, what kind of social engineering is that? Which category does it fall under?
So I feel that would fall under kind of a hyperbolic discounting. You're getting something right now. You're getting something for nothing. It starts out as a phishing email, right? So they're using phishing. The phishing email comes in. It promises you this huge sum of money, and you don't have to do anything but reply. Well, then what happens is they say, okay, well, in order for us to get through all of the legal red tape over here in Nigeria, we need $500 from you, or we need $1,000 from you to pay off the people that we need to grease the palms of here to make this $4 million transfer happen. So you send them $1,000 and you never hear from them again. So that's the 419 scam. It has evolved since the original Nigerian 419 scam. And they call it the Nigerian 419 scam, as Mike has pointed out in chat, because that's the penal code in Nigeria that makes fraud illegal. And so this is a fraudulent act. The people that do occasionally, very seldom get prosecuted under this, are prosecuted under Article 419. So that's how it got its name. But it has evolved as the years have gone on. The other thing that we need to think about is recency effect, right? Whatever has happened most recently, and to us or to our companies, that stays in our head. That's what we're thinking about. As an example, I had an individual that I worked with, very talented person, had gone through some issues with a Russian hacking group called Grizzly Step. Any attack that happened after that for like the next year or so, they automatically assumed it was Grizzly Step until they looked at the evidence and attained attribution for those acts and figured out, oh, it really wasn't Grizzly Step. But because Grizzly Step had hit them, they had that recency bias. And then finally, there's authority bias. I know we can't see y'all, but just kind of in your office or your cube or your house or wherever, show of hands, how many people have gotten a text message from the CEO or an email from the CEO wanting gift cards? We get them all the time from the CEO of CI, and it's really not the CEO. We know that he would just pick up the phone and call us if he needed something, and he would never need gift cards. But there's that authority. You don't want to get in trouble. You don't want to tell the CEO or the CFO no, so that authority bias plays in heavily. It could be a subconscious thing. We don't want to get in trouble at work. We want to be good employees, do a good job. I better go get those gift cards. 90% of all cybersecurity attacks start with a phishing email. We have to get it right 100% of the time. The bad actors don't have to get in once. They only need one person to make that click, and they're in our network. And now we've got much bigger problems. If you click on a phishing email, let somebody know right away. You're not going to get in big trouble. You shouldn't get in big trouble if your company is an upright company. You're not going to get in trouble. It lets them address that damage that was done and minimize it for you before it turns into something huge. So it all started out, everybody's familiar with phishing. We've all heard phishing. It's really starting to expand. We have phishing, smishing, vishing, and now quishing. So smishing is basically a fish, right? But it's sent via SMS or text message. We have vishing. That's a voice call. That's where somebody's going to pick up the phone, somebody like me, and we're going to call you up, and we're going to tell you that we're Dave over in IT, and we're going to become your best friend on that phone in the first 3 minutes. We're in big trouble because we screwed up. We're going to get you to feel sorry for us. We're going to prey on your biases, and we're going to get you to give us information that you shouldn't give out. And then quishing is the new one. I'm based out of the greater Las Vegas area for Critical Insight. Every place in Vegas now, like all the restaurants, have gone to QR codes. Quishing is using a QR code that has a malicious link embedded in it. All the restaurants have a QR code on the table. If you're in the greater Seattle area, parking meters now use QR codes. So now you're scanning a QR code expecting to do a financial transaction. So now your guard's a little bit lower. Be aware of these. You can't hover over the link like you can on a web page or an email. If there's a link, you can hover over and see the address it's going to lead you to. on a QR code, there is zero indication of where that's going to go. So just be very, very cautious. Assume the worst. Verify this stuff. It's like Ronald Reagan said eons ago: trust, but verify. Make sure that we are, clicking on things that we know what it is before we do that click. So exactly like Mike said in the chat, a QR code, it's a URL. You just can't read it. You can't see where it's leading you. It's like being blindfolded and led down an alleyway. Might be something neat at the end of the alley. Might be muggers. No idea. So it's always good to assume it's the muggers. Telephone threats. We started talking about that a little bit. How I'm going to call you up. You're going to become my best friend in the first 3 or 4 minutes of that call, and now I'm going to own your network. I had an old saying when I did a lot more social engineering work and physical penetration tests. If I can get you to smile at me, I can get domain admin or root on your network. It's just a matter of how they do it. So hackers will pretend there's somebody they're not. They'll lie. They'll lie, and they're very good at it. They practice. They have these whole personas drawn up. They will clone voices now. They have that capability. Technology, AI, it's like a tool. It's a hammer, right? We can build a house with it, or we can crack somebody in the back of the head at an ATM. The bad actors are cracking people in the back of the head with AI, and they're using it to create fake voice things. There were some folks, they got a call from their granddaughter. She'd been kidnapped. They paid the ransom. Granddaughter was at home, safe and sound. She had a YouTube channel. They got a couple of seconds of her voice, threw it into AI, and cloned her voice. If somebody calls you and they want something, be suspicious. Offer to call them back on the number that you have for them that you know is valid. If you have an established email with them, hey, I'll reach out to you on your company email. I'm not going to reply to your Gmail email. It just came in. If they're vishing, they're going to try and get you to do things that you should not be doing. Call them back. It's not going to, if they're legit, they will not mind you calling back. I promise you this. I've had a couple of clients here at CI. I'll call them up. Hey, it's Brad. And they say, hey, we're going to call you back on the phone number that we have for you. Perfect. That's great. We love to see that. The grandchild in trouble is a classic. The deep fakes will do the voice perfectly. A company I used to work at, we deep faked one of our coworkers into a Lord of the Rings movie. We made him Gollum, and the voice and everything is perfect. So there's a lot of tools out there that can be used for these telephone threats. Telephone threats, big money. Caesars, some of you may have heard that Caesars and MGM were breached last year. That all started with a phone attack to their help desk to get password reset, and they fell for it. Fred, did you have something?
I was just going to say our history here when we're doing social engineering assessments is 100% when it comes to vishing, the voice approach. It's a different type of attack because you don't have time to sit back and go, oh, I'm going to look at this, or I'm going to examine the URL, or I'm going to look for weird punctuation that wouldn't be here, or the logo's off. You don't get any of that luxury. You basically are on the spot. Somebody's literally asking you questions in real time, keeping you off balance. So know that it's actually sometimes easiest to call somebody and get them to do your bidding, easier than it is to do it by phishing or one of these other methods. So don't discount how easy it is to use the voice to do these kinds of things.
Yeah, emails don't carry emotion, whereas a phone call does. I can be very friendly, very likable. I'm getting you to laugh. I'm cracking jokes. We develop that quick rapport, and you can't do that as easily, in my opinion, in an email. So yeah, the voice stuff is a danger. Drew in the chat has mentioned how the CIO had asked for a password reset via their Comcast account because they couldn't get into their network account, and Drew overcame the authority bias, right? That, oh, it's the CIO, I better just jump and do it, and made them call into the help desk and answer some questions and whatnot. And the CIO was good with it. So don't ever be afraid of that. It's very important that you challenge anybody that you don't know, especially if they call you on the phone or if you get a sketchy email. So deep fakes, right now we're getting text messages from the CIO saying, hey, go buy gift cards. There are tools out there that do the video. It fakes the voice, and then it fakes the video so that the lips line up exactly. So it's very important to be on the lookout. If you see something that doesn't seem right, pick up the phone or send an email to an established contact method with that person and say, did you just send me something? Today, it's text messages asking us to buy gift cards. Tomorrow, it's going to be video from our CEO. And it's going to match up. It's going to look legit. And they're going to ask us to go buy gift cards. So just be very, very cautious of this. There was a company in Hong Kong, and they had like the CEO and the CFO and like the head of AP, I believe, were all on the call. The head of AP was on the call. That was the real person. The CEO and the CFO were deep fakes. And they convinced the person that had the keys to the bank account to send $25 million to the scammers. And it's hard to get that money back because they sent it out. It wasn't like somebody came in and stole the money. One of your employees sent it because they fell for a deep fake. Very, very easy to fall for these. We're seeing a lot of this stuff right now with the elections on both sides of the aisle. Always vet anything that you see. So then finally, we have impersonation or pig butchering. In the old days, we referred to this kind of as like honeypotting. Basically, you're taking a pig and you're fattening it up before you take it off to market. And what this is, you can see a couple of examples here that were sent out to Mike, and it's people on LinkedIn, just random people saying, hi, how are you? Are you working? What you up to? Hey, you want to have a phone call? They're going to get you to be their friend. I'm your best friend. A lot of times, if you're a male, this person will be an attractive female. If you're a female, it'll be an attractive male. They're trying to kind of prey on your biases and prey on things that they think that you're going to like, people you're going to like to talk to. Be cautious. Beatrice Lee here in this example actually listed themselves, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, they actually said that they were a CI employee. We have a lot of that. Check your LinkedIn for your companies. Look for fake accounts that say they work there because I guarantee they're using that against you in some way. But and Mike's example with Kathleen, perfect. Hey, what do you think about using the phone so we can have better conversations? Mike's like, nope, and moves on. That's what you should be doing with these. Nope, and move on. Virginia,
that I think I've seen as a challenge for this as well is that LinkedIn actually hasn't been able to shut this down. That's so right. Where there are lots of different companies saying like this person has never worked for us, yet they're claiming to be, and they're creating some kind of additional challenges either with customers or with current employees. As they say, be suspicious and just try not to give out any information. So back to you.
LinkedIn's response to that, by the way, is, go buy a verified account. Have everybody in your company buy verified accounts, which I'm not particularly happy with that response.
Yeah, let me just talk about this term pig butchering, because this originally, again, we have like the weirdest secret handshake language. Pig butchering really refers to developing a relationship with someone using a fake persona and then eventually talking them into investing in weird crypto schemes. You invest a little money, you make some money, and they say if you want to make some more money, invest some more money, and then they drain your wallet and they leave. And this is largely being run out of South Asian countries. And in some cases, these people are there not of their own free will running these things. And so be very aware when you're getting reach outs, whether it comes from social media, text messages, anywhere, that this is rampant right now.
Yeah, use safe words. I had a friend that actually they just left the call a few minutes ago, unfortunately, but I had a friend that I thought had passed away, like lost contact with this person for like 3 years. And then out of the blue, I get a LinkedIn message. And so right away, I'm thinking, this isn't them. It's somebody sitting in China trying to get access to something that I've got. And so I asked them some questions that only they would know. I'm like, your wife said that you and I could make a big purchase together. What was that purchase? And then we, obviously, being 12-year-old boys, didn't do it in the spirit of what your wife wanted us to do. We twisted it around. How did we twist it around? And this person was able to give me those answers, which worked really well. It's really nice if you can ask those challenge response type questions. So basically, to kind of tie all this together, how do we resist social engineering? What are some things that we can do to protect ourselves? First of all, educate your people. Talk to your people. Make sure you're doing regular security awareness training. It's huge. Don't make it dry. Don't make it boring. Make it engaging. Let people know, hey, you can use this not only for the company, but at home too, to protect your home network and your home credit card and things like that. Make sure your help desk is part of that training. Don't assume that your IT folks already know everything. We all We all came into this world not knowing this stuff. We all had to learn it. Maybe not everybody is at that same level. So we need to let everybody know what to watch out for and to educate those folks. Any unexpected offer or request for action is suspicious, regardless of where it comes from. Always verify that. If somebody asks you for something or offers you something out of the blue, follow up, not directly with them with the method that they came in, but make sure that you're verifying that they really are who they really say they are, because a lot of times they're not. Become aware of your biases. Kind of sit down and think about it. It doesn't have to be even in the scope of cybersecurity, your day-to-day activities. I had a conversation yesterday with Virginia. I kind of look back at that and say, okay, did I have any biases in that conversation? Did I use any language that I shouldn't have used? How does this look? You can take any day-to-day activity and kind of use that to kind of identify some of your biases that you may have, identify them and learn how to deal with those. Again, verify who's calling you. Make sure that they really are who they say they are. Safe words are a good message. If anybody on this call ever wants to call me and ask me a question, just say the word banana split and I'll know that you're at the webinar. Perfect. But have a predetermined safe word that you can use within your company that people will know it's you. It's just something that makes it a little more secure for you. Everybody on the internet wants something from you. They're either trying to sell something to you, they're going to steal something from you, they're going to manipulate your opinion, or they're going to sell you, sell your data. Oh, look, Facebook is free, TikTok is free, Instagram is free. There's a reason they're free. They're not selling to you, they're selling you to somebody else. So just be aware, whatever you post is being sold, and the internet is forever. Don't post anything company confidential out there. Just be very cautious with that stuff. And then finally, treat phishing and vishing just like spam calls on your phone. If you see something that comes in, it looks sketchy, don't reply, delete it, and move on. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Virginia, for discussion and Q&A.
Well, I think we're actually rounding out our time here together. So if there are any questions from the audience, please feel free to drop them here in the chat. We'll jump on them. But please stay connected with us and sign up for our daily IT security news blast. This is where you're going to get an email every single day, very early in the morning, from Mike Hamilton, who's been creating this email for the last 15 years. And you'll also be made aware of different webinars that we have upcoming. We have free monthly security awareness trainings online. Make sure to check out the website for those, criticalinsight.com/events. We also have regular online urgent panel webinars with something's newsworthy in like the urgent category. And we have podcasts that we attend as well. You can learn about our nonprofit partner, Pisces. I know that we had some conversations about that inside of the chat today. Check them out, piscesinternational.org. And if you would please let us know how we did, we would really appreciate it if you would fill out the survey that I'm about to drop into the chat. It would be great to have you join us for our next webinar as well, which is actually happening next week on 9/17 at 11:30 a.m. Pacific, 2:30 Eastern. It is Unlocking Cyber Insurance, Essential Steps for Protecting Your Business from Cyber Threats. So if you could please, I know that we just talked about being careful with all of these different links. I promise you that I'm not trying to elicit anything except for your feedback about how we did today. Fill out this Survey Monkey for us and let us know how we did. Final thoughts. Mike, we'll start with you.
So the internet is a very bad place. You need to be very aware of these particular techniques because these are the ones that are most widely used. And so if something is coming your way, it's very likely to be one of these techniques. Some kind of credential abuse, some kind of vulnerability exploit, or somebody's just going to talk you into doing something you don't want to do. So these three are the things to watch, especially if you're small, medium business, healthcare, etc. Do something about these three.
Brad, what you got?
Yeah, so cyber criminals are always targeting us. They're always evolving, though. Don't think that you can be all caught up on their tactics, techniques today, and you're good to go tomorrow. They're constantly evolving. So it's a continuing learning process. It's like we always say, security is a journey and not a destination. It's a continual learning thing. So just always keep learning.
Thanks, Brad. Fred, what you got?
Yep. This is all about the basics, folks. They're the hardest things to do. You need to practice them just like anybody that practices an instrument, a sport, whatever they do, you need to practice them every day.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a great day, everybody. And thanks for joining. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.